address them. So if you would like a sheet to be able to fill out, please feel free to raise your hand. We've got Kathy in the back to bring one over for you all. Yep. John over here. Anybody else? Back there also. Yep. I want to make sure we get all the information. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Good on you. I took the bus, so
Yeah, that's going to buy you.
I don't have any candidates.
well, which is understandable. I know. Oh, absolutely. Will you change your mind? Okay. Yeah, fine. Yeah, I have to get one. You need a pen?
I have a pen.
Got you. My bad.
Sorry, sir.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep. Give us a little more time before we get here, obviously. All right, for the folks who are coming in, oh, this sounds even better. For the folks who are coming in, a couple things. We've got a QR code for folks who want to pose questions. We're going to have a form so we can follow up. But if you want to write your questions down, we also have sheets of paper so we can get your feedback as well as your questions. We want to make sure we're able to address all of them. Okay? All right. Try to give y'all a couple minutes. Two minutes. Fair time. Actually, also feel free to grab a seat if y'all want. Thank you. So we feel comfortable doing so.
Thank you. Hi, how are you? Okay, how are you?
Okay, yeah, make sure. We're also, just to let folks know, we will be recording. We're going to have this live streamed on Facebook as well as recorded and uploaded to our ward website for those who can't make it, to make sure everyone's got the information or can get access to it. I'm literally waiting for it to turn 6. So do it right on the dot. I know we're, but you know somebody's gonna come in at 6:02, 6:03, right? So that's how we roll. That's right. That's right. All right. Does anybody have an issue with the QR code at all? Please let us know as well. We'll be happy to get to the link if necessary. No? All right. Send me back. Sorry. All right, 6 o'clock it is. Hey everybody, welcome to Swedish. First, I want to thank Swedish for giving us the space to be able to have this meeting. Thank you very much, Marcia and the team. Got a little bit of a lag. All right. Okay, so we might have a little bit of technical difficulty. As you can tell, it's coming up. I'm Alderperson Andre Vasquez from the 40th Ward. Thank you all so much for making it to this, which will be the first meeting to discuss the proposed, the Stabilization Housing Pilot that comes through from conversion of the Diplomat Motel. So we definitely got flyers out. Want to make sure neighbors were able to make it so we can talk through really what the plan is, kind of what the situation we're looking at is, and how I believe we have an opportunity to actually have a solution that allows for really better outcomes when we think about the problem of homelessness as we look at our city. So we want to kind of go over some of it. So first, here's the agenda. We'll be going over what the current landscape looks like when we talk about the city as well as the ward. And then we're going to talk through what the plan is We're also here with us are the Chicago Department of Public Health, as well as the Department of Housing. So we'll have folks presenting to y'all to kind of go over the plan. So as I stated, for those of you who may not have been able to hear when now you're coming in, if you have questions that you want to pose, we've got a number of things we're doing. So we've got the QR code up here if you're able to see it and get your phone on it. It's the same form that we shared online prior, but we want to make sure we have all the questions cataloged so we can get the answers and then be able to answer them and address any concerns folks have. We also will be opening it up to provide feedback as well. For those of you who are not tech savvy, you don't want to get on the phone and do all of that, we have physical copies and paper we can bring to you so you can write your questions down as well as your feedback. We want to make sure we collect it all. And again, we want your contact information so that we can share the answers. We are recording this. We will have it live streamed. We will be posting it up on the website. And we will be looking at like all the questions that we get to see if we end up with like a FAQ, right? Or a fact sheet based on the questions we're being asked. But thank you so much for the engagement. So we'll be going over, like I said, the current need, the stabilization housing goals and plan, the proposed location, the process and timelines, and then we'll have time at the end for questions. What we'll do is we'll open it up, since we'll have people writing the questions already. We'll open it up for people who have questions, right? At which point, raise your hand, somebody will come to you. And we want to make sure we're also respectful of everyone's time so we can get as many other questions in. All right. So first, kind of let's talk through the situation we're looking at, right? If you're living in Chicago, as we all are, I don't think it's a foreign concept. If you're walking around the streets, you might see somebody actually living on them. Or if you're going through our public parks, you're seeing the tent encampments. And so I think this is reflective of really a growing problem that we've seen here in Chicago, and something that I think is clear we need to address. But I don't think many people know the scale of what we're talking about, right? So the way the city measures homelessness is they pick a random day in January and they do a count. And they kind of look and say how many folks are currently homeless that we can take count of to get a sense. So when they did it in January 26th of 2023, they found that 6,139 people were estimated experiencing homelessness in Chicago on that single night. Out of the 6,139, 5,149 were residing in shelter, 990 were residing in unsheltered locations. Unsheltered locations are streets. They're viaducts. They're where we know folks are, right? And so I didn't want to like water that down, even though it's framed as unsheltered location. So when we look at the 40th ward, this is one of the questions we got initially is, well, how many folks are homeless in the 40th ward? What's that looking like? So from January 1st, 2022, so May 5th, 2023, so about a year and a half, we got 2,210 total requests for shelter that came from the ward. So that's obviously not 2,000 people. There's multiple requests that occur, right? There's multiple times that people are asking for shelter. But to give you a sense of the amount, it's 2,210 requests that came in. So that's just the city's estimates based on tracking, who's actually making requests, what it looks like the one night where they're actually doing the counts to see who's out there. But there are groups such as the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless that have done research on this and have estimated that over 65,000 individuals in the city are experiencing homelessness, whether it's homelessness as we kind of are typically know it to be, right? Somebody's on the street, families, kids don't have a home, or doubled up homelessness, meaning somebody can't afford their own place, so they're staying with somebody else. So that, to put for reference, when you look at one ward, it's 59,000 people, right? So you're looking at more than one ward's worth of people in need of housing. And so I think we all know this is a challenge. But as that challenge itself is growing, we now have something that's exponentially increased it. And that is what we're seeing, where we have about 10,000 current new asylum seekers who've been coming into Chicago. By coming in, I say they're being bused and flown in from other states. Partially because some of those cities feel like they can't handle it, partially because it is a political point to make by sending them to Chicago that's proudly known for being a welcoming city. But what we're looking at, because of that situation, in a city where we don't have the infrastructure currently to make sure we transition folks that are coming in, to make sure we have housing for those that need it, we're looking at 10,000 folks who are here now, and you're looking at the city sheltering about maybe 4,000 of them. So just to put in perspective, the city's infrastructure for dealing with homelessness has at best 4,100 people it can serve. You've got 4,000 people on top, aside from that, I should say, that are the refugees coming in. So that's why you've seen in other neighborhoods, schools that are empty being open to provide respite centers. Wright College most recently. So that's the scale of what we're looking at. To add more of a fine point to it, when we're looking at the police stations, every police station in the city of Chicago is currently a shelter. Whether it wants to be or not, there are not enough capacity to be able to house folks. So right now, you're seeing, it says about 700. I think that number is actually closer to 900 at this point. If you go to the 20th district, for example, on a given day, you have anywhere from 35 to 60 folks. That's kids, single digit age, out there on the floor, on blankets, and on mattresses in the police station lobby. And that is in every single police station in the city of Chicago. The reason why I mention that, in context of what we're talking about here, is the fact that the city itself does not have the capacity and has not built the infrastructure to deal with the scale of the problem that we're looking at. And what we currently have seen in the past has been what people identify as a shelter, which is one large building with a whole bunch of cots in it, and that's what it looks like, right? There's a lack of support systems, there's a lack of dignity for people that are looking for housing. And so what occurred here in the 40th Ward is, as we were looking at Lincoln Avenue, as we're kind of looking at the streetscape, at creating an arts district and making sure we're looking at the opportunity sites, there were a number of buildings that currently are on the market and not moving. Most notably for some folks on Winamac and Lincoln, 5035 North Lincoln, it's the pile of bricks with murals on it. It's not moving because no one's buying, right? The motels also had a similar situation. So you've got the Oh My Motel, you've got Guest House, Summit, Diplomat, some of them which were on the market, also not moving. So in our conversation, once I got elected, we looked at Lincoln as being an opportunity site. And so I started reaching out and talking to the different motel owners, and a couple things stood out. Many of them articulated to us that it was the first time that anyone in government had actually reached out to them. In the past, and I'll say justifiably so, there was activity that's a little bit illicit, except for the a little bit part at the motels. But there were concerns about safety at that point, so the city was looking to acquire properties then through eminent domain, and ended up doing, spending a lot of tax dollar, but ultimately leading to like the library at Budlong or the police station itself in the 20th district. So again, we were looking at the same opportunity sites. These things were not moving. And so COVID and the ARPA funding that were associated led to some funding that the Department of Housing and Department of Family Support Services looked at to be able to create stabilization housing. Some of this was based on learnings from when the city during COVID took over some of the hotels downtown to be able to provide shelter for the unhoused. So what the city is looking to do at the time, and that's part of the conversation, is to actually put forward a pilot taken from the learnings that they had downtown, seeing that they had better outcomes into how to address what's going on. So that provided the opportunity to have a conversation around a number of the motels. Due to different circumstances, what we're looking at now is one motel being one that's being moving forward for stabilization housing. So wanted to provide all of that context. And so I want to bring up folks from the city to kind of present the plan, the goals, the timeline. And as I said before, if you've got any questions, you have the QR code. I'll do that one again real quickly to be able to put any questions from your phone so we can follow up. You can also raise your hand if you've got questions. That way we can bring you a paper so you can write them down. We want to collect all the questions folks have to make sure we can respond to them. Okay? Yeah.
I'm going to do the first one.
The first one forward?
I don't have too much time. I have to go.
Oh, okay, so right now we're doing a
I just want
presentation.
to say something and I'm going to leave.
Sure. Well, the thing, here's the thing, hold on.
My name is Lila.
Lila,
live here
I
and
appreciate that,
yeah.
but we have to make sure we do the presentation
only,
first.
how I feel like I have to leave because
Sure,
I have a sick person. Okay, you talk about these immigrants. Okay, you talk about, we have so many homelessness in Chicago. And now you talk about homelessness because like till now, nobody cares about those homeless people. Okay? When I moved here in this house where I live now, my tax was $1,600. You know how much is now? $9,000. And let me tell you something. Those people, you guys welcome them here in Sanctuary City. Biden administration welcomed them here. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they came from. We don't know what the hell they want here. They let them come here.
Ma'am?
We have, I'm talking now, shut up, all of you, I don't care what you want to say. I'm sick of it. We don't need
Immigrants are not criminals.
Everyone, I need to do me a
I'm an
favor.
immigrant. Am I a criminal?
I'm not going to pay for them. I'm sick and tired of Biden administration.
Yes.
And look what they are doing to this country.
No.
This country.
This is a country of immigrants.
I appreciate what you're saying.
I don't care what you say. Look,
Okay, I
I'm sick
appreciate what
of
you're saying.
tired of all of you politicians. You are no good. You are bastard. Excuse me, I can say this great
hold on.
country. I can say
Let's
everything
make sure.
I don't care, but I'm sick of it. And you want to bring it to your house? Bring it to your house. But I'm not paying. I'm not paying from my pocket for them. I have not. Politicians like you, Sanctuary City, you liberals, you are
Sister, I appreciate what you're saying.
You take them to your house, and Mr. Bun, take them to my house.
I want you, hold on. I understand what you're saying. You've got to make sure other time that give up first.
What you guys did to them, I feel bad for those people.
I can tell you feel bad for them.
You are responsible, and you take them to your house.
I just want you to know, hold on, for all the others here, the more this happens, the less questions you can ask.
The real
Look at the crime here in Chicago. Look at the crime. Look, it's all
right by the
With all the love and respect in the world.
we have no say. And this is what I'm saying. Look at this people here. Memorial Day.
Shut up.
Thank you.
All of you.
I will also remind our neighbors here that there are people that feel the same way about anybody with an accent, right? Let's not get it confused. There are people that say that about some of the neighbors here, right? It's very easy to vilify someone you don't know, who sounds a little bit different, who looks a little bit different. I think some who may not agree with our prior speaker might have thoughts about her as well. It is absolutely fair for somebody to bring up their concerns. I want to make sure that we know that. But we also want to make sure that there is a respect here and that people can ask their questions. It is why we want people to do so. But I will remind you all, the more time you take up, the less time there is for actual questions and people have real concerns they want answered. Am I right on that? Yeah. Okay. So I would ask that everybody show the respect to others, ask the question, and make sure you make the best use of the time. There are plenty of social media posts if you want to type out all of this stuff, right? We want to make sure that we're hearing the actual concerns so we can address them in a way that's productive when we're moving forward. So I really appreciate that you're here to be engaged. We want to continue that. So right now, we're going to start the presentation, and then we're going to open it up for questions after the presentation. Fair? Yeah. Thank you very much. All right.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm Matt Richards. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Behavioral Health at the Chicago Department of Public Health. I'm going to be talking you through the program model that we're proposing at this site. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history, the services that we're proposing to offer. We want to have time for questions. My team's going to stay after, so if you want to discuss one-on-one, happy to answer questions that you have. So for starters, what's the goal of the program that we're proposing? Most fundamentally, we're trying to create a pathway out of homelessness for people that are currently homeless and are living with untreated physical health care. Can you all, I'm sorry?
Please use the microphone.
You can't hear me? Okay. So first of all, the primary goal of this is to create a pathway out of homelessness for people that are currently homeless. This program is specifically focused on persons who are living with untreated physical health and behavioral health conditions, and that was a primary reason they became homeless in the first place. So I want to be very clear, this is not specifically a program related to the current migrant crisis, so that is certainly an important part of the housing challenge in the city. This program is not specifically addressing that challenge, so I want to be very clear about that. Secondly, a goal of this program is that we are trying to engage persons in primary care and behavioral health care, which will be delivered on site. So if you know something about the way that housing services in the United States work, much of the time people are either in shelters or they are in permanent and supportive housing in the community, which presumes they are capable of a great deal of autonomy, don't need a lot of support. The purpose of this model is to pair housing plus services to position people to become able to live independently in the community. The third goal is to reduce spending. What we know, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it, is that there's about 2,000 residents in the city of Chicago that cyclically utilize services, emergency room services, 911 services, etc. There was a study done, which I'll tell you about, that a group of 1,200 people were connected to $300 million in spending over 4 years. So the goal of a program like this is also to reduce spending and to save the taxpayer money. So what's the context for this? I just mentioned it. There's a study that was done by the University of Chicago called the Roadmap Initiative that looked at people that cyclically utilize services in the city of Chicago. If you'd like to see this study, you can email us. We are happy to send you a copy of it. What the study found is that most of the individuals that were cycling through services were doing so because of untreated health conditions. Physical health conditions, mental health conditions, substance use related conditions, often 2 or 3 of those. And what they found was that these individuals spend 1 in every 5 days cycling across settings, so there's a lot of 911 services that could be spent on other things, that are spent repeatedly responding to people for the same issue over and over and over again. And they found that access to stable housing was a challenge. Only 15% of people in this group actually were connected to stable housing. So we know when we look at the housing continuum in the city of Chicago, there's a few different challenges. One is that we have a lot of congregate living spaces, right? Which is where people are living all together in the same room. If you've ever had a loved one who had a serious mental health condition, that had a substance use condition, that had a significant physical health condition, where they couldn't ambulate, where they couldn't walk around, think about them being in a room with 400 people. How do you think that would go? If there was a lot of loud noise, if there was a lot of constant movement, if there were lots of rules and they couldn't remember all the rules, right? So one of the things we're trying to do here is to stand up a program that's non-congregate. You get your own space. Number 2, there's on-site intensive physical health care services from the same group of people who come to know you over time. It is not a different doctor every day. It's somebody who knows you, who comes to know you over a period of 3 to 6 months, who learns your history. What's your history of getting health care? Do you trust doctors? Do you trust nurses? Have you ever felt like you were mistreated by healthcare professionals? How can we rebuild trust with you? A lot of the folks in this group get a lot of episodic health care, meaning they get health care once from one person, somebody different 3 days later, somebody different the day after that. So we're trying to address those problems through this model and to reduce utilization of services over time. I'm not going to belabor the point with this slide because we're going to provide you with all of them and I'm happy to answer questions. Unfortunately, people experiencing homelessness in the United States die 10 to 20 years before everybody else. Depends on the study you look at. There's lots of different reasons why. They're all listed on this slide, which breaks all the rules of slides. I apologize. But happy to answer questions that you might have about these different reasons. But the purpose of what we're trying to do is to address the health issues that frequently lead to illness and death among people experiencing homelessness and lead to their homelessness in the first place. So you might have heard the alderman referenced it during the COVID pandemic. I work at the health department. Many of my colleagues are here this evening from the health department. We had residents in the shelter system that were at very high risk of dying from COVID due to underlying physical health conditions that they had. And so what we did was we offered people the opportunity to be in their own health hotel room where they could get on-site healthcare services in the hopes that they would not acquire COVID and experience long-lasting illness or death. And so there were over 200 individuals that were ultimately diverted into hotel housing, got services, and we found a wide range of things related to this. You see the outcomes on the bottom, that there were lots of folks that initiated treatments they had never been offered before, that we were able to reduce people's high blood pressure, blood sugar. We did not have a single person die of COVID via this program. We had very few people that required mechanical ventilation in a hospital setting. We published a paper in the Journal of the American Medical Association about this, and it's become a model that other cities are looking at. If you want to look at that article, happy to share it with you. I know not everybody likes to read medical journals. I have too much time on my hands. But happy to talk you through it. This was the impetus for what we are proposing in the 40th Ward today. If you look at the 260 guests, 259, the vast majority, the majority went into permanent housing. Other folks had other needs. There were people that went into residential treatment programs for physical health conditions, mental health conditions, substance use conditions, people who returned to their families because they had been disconnected from family due to an unaddressed health issue. There were people that needed to be in COVID isolation because they acquired COVID. There were people that had unaddressed hospital issues that required hospital-based care. So you see all the exits for the 259 people are represented on this slide. Our goal is for every person to have a permanent exit, which could be into permanent supported, it could be back with family. Unfortunately, sometimes folks have unaddressed, undiagnosed things like dementia or Alzheimer's that requires higher levels of care, like skilled nursing care. There are other programs in other cities that use a similar model, Denver and Seattle being two of them, where you pair non-congregate housing plus services, which is what we are proposing here. Again, your own unit, on-site physical health care, behavioral health care, social services, a team of people who come to know you, and there's been evaluations looking at these indicating that they are effective at getting people into permanent housing that otherwise probably would not end up on that pathway. So what's the program design? The Diplomat, we anticipate, would have 40 units. There's actually more units than that, but because of certain consolidations related to accessibility and a few other things, we anticipate 40 people at a time could be accommodated by the program. It's an anticipated 3 to 6 month stay before exit into permanent supportive. That's the goal. You see under the health services section on the left what we offer. So we would be offering primary care, mental health care, substance use care, other forms of treatment, social services, case management, etc. This is a very high-touch model. So this is not you're in your own unit and you're not engaging with a healthcare team. You're engaging with a healthcare team every day in this model. I mentioned length of stay. If you look at the right-hand side, who are we prioritizing for this program? There's a couple of different things. One, it's people that are being referred to us because they're cycling through other systems, emergency departments, public safety services, 911, shelter services, folks that are cyclically utilizing those systems over and over again. We anticipate there will be 2 referral pathways. One would be from this community. So one of the goals of this program is to address the problem of homelessness with people who already live in this community. It's important to understand that. A second thing to understand is that we would look at data to see if there are residents in adjacent communities that fit the criteria that we think could benefit from the model. They could be eligible for this program even if they do not live in the community, but one of the commitments made to the alderman is that we will prioritize referrals, one of the pathways being residents from this community. So I just mentioned this, data referral and community referral. I won't belabor the point. So if you have questions about this, again, I'm going to stick around afterwards, so if you want to talk about it more, you have concerns about what we're thinking, please let me know. But if you look on the right-hand side, it sort of gives you broad sense of criteria. So obviously a person has to be experiencing homelessness. They need to have been identified as potentially benefiting from integrated healthcare. And integrated healthcare just means physical healthcare plus healthcare that addresses mental health, substance use, other challenges they may have. And they need to be at high risk of infection or bad outcome if they were to acquire COVID. We're looking at people who cyclically utilize systems, I already mentioned that, people who are living with behavioral health conditions. So what we have an RFP out right now, which is a procurement, it's a bid, so that partners across the city can bid on this. The health department, the Department of Housing will be evaluating those proposals, scoring those proposals. But you see here in the bolded images are what is required of the providers, which is, in addition to the housing we're discussing, healthcare services, case management, care coordination, property management, security. These are all non-negotiable. So you have to be providing all of these, either yourself or through a sub-delegate. We are encouraging partnerships across agencies, because not all agencies do all of these things. So we would be open to proposals where, for instance, somebody who manages properties pairs with a healthcare service provider or healthcare service providers. They are required, they would be required, I should say, to provide 24/7 on-site staffing. So that's important to know. Daily on-site property management, and there will need to be a comprehensive safety plan that we develop with the partners and the alderman's office, and community would certainly have input around that. This is the RFP selection process. We've already released the RFP on May 5th. We expect it to be evaluated in the next 2 weeks, and then probably in the 2 weeks after that, we would anticipate making an award. And I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Meredith from the Department of Housing.
Thank you, Matt. Hi, everyone. My name is Meredith Buer. I'm with the Chicago Department of Housing. I'm on the Chicago Recovery Plan team as a program manager. And I'm going to talk a little bit about DOH's role and the site that's being proposed. But just to start, the Department of Housing is really excited to be a partner with the Department of Public Health and the Alderman's Office in this program. Our department has been working over the past 6 months to conduct engagement with people with lived experience. That's people who are frontline staff, as well as people who have experienced homelessness. 70% of the people who have experienced homelessness who we've talked with have indicated this need for a higher level of services, and we have a few quotes from folks that I want to just read because I think it's a really good grounding tool. So the first is, I think that the most important thing somebody can get is counseling, because I've never really talked about my problems until I recently started talking to a counselor, and it really helps. The next, people don't have money to go see the counselor should be able to come here and see us. And lastly, I still need services. For me, I need the housing where they can keep an eye on you. Me personally, I don't trust myself out there. I just want the services and my own space. I need the connection. So the site that's being considered for this program is the Diplomat Motel, 5230 North Lincoln, in this ward in the Lincoln Square neighborhood. The building's about 15,000 square feet. It has 46 existing rooms, to what Matt said earlier, with combining a few rooms to create some ADA accessible space and creating space for some of the clinical services to take place on site. The goal is for 40 units to remain for people to stay. The building's currently zoned B32, and the proposal is for the site to be acquired by the city with a delegate agency that Matt was just describing, providing the on-site services and property management of the space. With the city acquiring the site, a couple of just things for folks to note. There are long-term goals for stabilization housing to continue for a long time, but as the program will be evaluated, the building could be used for other uses down the road, including the stabilization housing continued programming, as well as things like permanent supportive housing, affordable housing, or other public health sort of related programming, all of which would serve people who are experiencing homelessness. A couple of notes, the Alderman mentioned earlier the arts district where this building is located. And so the buildings would be rehabbed, of course, to both serve the people who are staying there and to fit in with the district that's being developed. And so there are some guidelines from the Department of Planning and Development, which would help to both beautify the space on the outside as it exists and to stay in line with the design plans for the corridor. The city right now is working to secure an architect partner and a general contractor who will help to mock up renovation and property design plans for the rehab work associated with the property, which really should help to both give a facelift to the building and to make it serve the needs of the people who are staying there. The process of acquiring is a little bit complicated, so I'll talk a little bit about both that and the RFP process and where we're at. So CDPH and DOH work together to assess properties that would fit the needs for this program. We work to meet with the Alderman's office, and now we're in the process of both having this RFP out in the world to select the delegate agency to run the program, and to figure out what's coming next, which is the acquisition, zoning, and rehab process. So we, as CDPH and DOH, will go to City Council for acquisition authority for the property, and then we'll go back to City Council to go through a plan development to get appropriate zoning at the site for this use. Once the site is acquired after that, then renovations will begin on the facility, and we are aiming for all of that to take place for the program to start operations by the end of the year. Thus far to date, we have gone before the Community Development Commission and have gotten their sort of approval for acquisition authority, and then the introduction for the acquisition authority ordinance will take place in June. With that in mind, just a couple of key dates for you to have on your calendars for public meetings that are taking place. So a couple of city council meetings, the first in June for acquisition authority, the committee meeting likely taking place in July, and then the July city council meeting for that approval, and then introduction of the plan development, and then going through plan commission, back to another committee, and then September city council for approval of that. These are all goals, and there are lots of processes to get there, but just so you're aware what else is happening, all of these public meetings are up usually on the city clerk's website if you have questions and want to know how to access them. And then the goal is to also have a follow-up within this community, so having another community meeting likely in August to be able to come back with the delegate agency selected and providing more information, details on the site plan improvements, details on the property management plan, the public safety plan at the site, and any other sort of information that continues to grow as we get that partner in place and build out their scope of work. And with that, I will bring back up the Alderman and Matt, and I think we're ready for questions.
All right, thank you very much for that. So we've got some time for questions, which I appreciate. Thank you both for presenting and kind of sharing through. So as was stated,
Police officers speak to us, is what you're saying,
sure, we got the 20th District Officer, if you'd like to come up.
Did you say those slides would be posted?
Yeah, we'll make sure we share all of it. As we stated, there'll be a subsequent meeting with the delegate partner. When we talk about the safety plan, we'll be working with the 20th District to make sure that all those things are considered, so.
Before you start clapping, let's just make sure that it won't end in boos, okay? So, my name is Carlin Morris. I'm a captain assigned to the 20th District. I'm here on behalf of our Commander Brendan McGruden, who couldn't be here. This meeting is very important, and he had to attend a meeting that's also important. Before I get started, I just wanted to preview some of the statistics that we had for the current location of the Diplomat Hotel in regards to our calls for service. So pretty much, I'm putting on my glasses because I'm showing my age here. Pretty much we had 107 total calls for service over a period of 1st of November through the 31st of May. And the number of calls is primarily, believe it or not, the highest number of calls for service was a premise check. So that would be officers from the 20th District proactively checking the license and the current status of that location at any given time. The second largest number of calls for service were the disturbances, which there were 9. The next category would be emergency medical services. That would be ambulance or paramedics called to that location, and then there were 8. After that, it would be music disturbances, which there were 7. And there actually were 8 calls that had no police services, and then there were a series of other calls, cell phone hang up, and let's say lesser calls. There was an assault, on view, auto accident, battery in progress, but those were calls where there were 1 or 2. So pretty much the location has not been a significant driver in terms of calls for service. That's not to discount the reason that we're all here, right, which would be public safety. So the way that our commander sees it and the way that we see it is we're eager to work with the city in regards to the security plan. We want to know if there's going to be the 24-hour presence of an individual on duty, making sure they are aware of their responsibility in terms of if there were a crime that occurred, them being proactive and cooperative with Chicago Police Department in order for us to take the appropriate police action. Because remember, we're all in this together. We may not all agree. We may get excited over various our understandings or misunderstandings of what the plan is. As you know, they just illustrated that the plan requires additional development and approval, but we're here because we love our community, right? And the 20th district, there's an inordinate amount of officers that actually live and work in the district, so we're all concerned. I happen to be a South Sider, but after all the festivities and fireworks from earlier today, and all the passion, and let's call it passion, right? Because we're here because we care, it makes me want to move to the 20th district. If anybody can help me out with that, I'd really appreciate it. But pretty much, so that's our perspective. We're looking at the security plan, and also we're actually interested to know the services that are being offered, because from what I understand, this is an intermittent program, which individuals would cycle in and out based on their need for services and taking advantage of services. And we just want to make sure that the methodology of the program actually was supported by the end result of individual transitioning and there not being just a problem location. Because that'd be kind of embarrassing, right? The city of Chicago is sponsoring a problem building, right? And then we'd have to go to the Department of Law and our trouble buildings units in order to address that. So we want to just make sure that we're all here for the appropriate role of helping individuals transition into greener pastures. If you have any questions for me directly, I'll stick around after the meeting. Yes, ma'am. Could you stand up, please, and give us your name?
Sure. My name is Lucia Sniper, and
yes.
I have questions for Vasquez. First of all, I met some of the immigrants that were sleeping in the police station, and I don't appreciate that you are trying to score political points by using the immigrants. You know very well that the immigrants are not going to go into the hotel because they don't have schizophrenia. They may have some trauma from what they survived, but they don't have schizophrenia. They don't have drug addiction. They're moms and kids. So you using the immigrants to score a point is very unfair to them. And I disagree with anyone that was yelling and screaming on that point. With regard to safety, you also said that there will be 24 physical presence. I actually happened to read the proposal that was posted, and it says that the expectation for respondents is operating 24 hours, 7 days a week with a minimum number of qualified staff members on site or via telehealth to meet programs. This is on page 18 of the proposal. So my question to you is, if a person is experiencing mental crisis, what are you gonna do? Wait, hold on, give me your password, let's log into telehealth. Hey, Mr. Psychiatrist, in the end of the world, could you please give, this is not well thought out. And I also think that the money for all these services is not gonna be sufficient. I also, your security proposal talks about a little bit of classes and all that, but it does not address how do you deal with violent individuals in mental crisis, because you know that's gonna happen. Maybe it's not the fault of these people, but we're talking of people, the proposal talks about people with bipolar disorder, people with schizophrenia, people with drug dependency, people who are in and out of jail and emergency room. So please address this.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I'll answer the first part because it's more germane to my approach. I was pretty clear on the outset. This is not for the refugees or the migrants. These are folks that are experiencing homelessness that need the support systems. What I provided as context is the fact that the city doesn't do enough for that. And on top of that, we have another 10,000 that we still haven't figured out an answer for. So it's not that this is going to deal with the refugees that need a service, it's that the city doesn't have the infrastructure for any of them, period, which is why we're looking to address the fact that the city doesn't have the capacity. So, but I'll pass over to Matt for the health question.
So let me start with the question about telehealth. So telehealth is not a replacement for on-site staffing. I want to be very clear about that. We use telehealth if we need to get a specialty consult with somebody, like a psychiatrist, like a subspecialty doctor, where it's just not feasible for them to be on site. But I want to be very clear, telehealth it's for consultative support. It's not replacing on-site staff. With respect to, you asked about mental health crisis. So any staff that work in a program like this are going to be expected to be trained in mental health crisis. That's a core part of what they do, is helping people identify crisis before it arises, being trained in de-escalation, helping people verbalize what they need so we can help them be safe. That's all just an expectation from a staffing perspective. Certainly if you need to call 911, that is something we will do. We work very closely with the police leadership. So if that needs to happen, that would happen. I want to talk about this notion, though, that people with behavioral health conditions are more likely to be violent. A very, very, very consistent finding in research is actually the opposite of that is true. That people living with behavioral health conditions are much more likely to be victimized, not to perpetrate violence. That's a very, very consistent finding. Happy to share the research with you on that. If somebody had a history of violent behavior, they would not be appropriate for this setting if we thought it was going to represent a risk to other residents or to staff. So that would certainly be considered. But that's not a common issue that we deal with. We did not have that issue at Hotel 166. So I just want to assure you we would not anticipate that to be a problem.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Meredith. I live spitting distance from the Diplomat. I wanted to thank you, Alder Vasquez, fellow Meredith, and Matt for giving us this opportunity to ask questions. I have two related questions. One is, I'm wondering about the contract process. Did Hotel 166 run on a contract process, and did you bring in a service or a partner system of services? And then relatedly, how are we going to measure success of this pilot, and related to that, the success of whoever we choose to receive the award?
Sure, you start to follow up. All right, okay. So part of what we want to do going forward, and just to kind of set the stage, is once we figure out who is selected to be the awardee, having that conversation with them about what it looks like, what services they bring. You'll know who that person is. You can compare what other services are doing currently in the city. As we mentioned, we want to partner with the 20th district as well as the community to figure out what a security plan looks like, so people know that that's being addressed. But beyond that, what I plan and envision is to have quarterly meetings to be able to talk through what's been happening, so we can share both the successes, because I think people need to see that, as well as what challenges are happening to be able to make adjustments, address it. So our plan is within the time frame of the pilot to make sure we have regular communication so people see what's happening, because a concern that I have is that people, and this isn't exclusive to the motel, when left to their own devices, imagine something's even worse than it actually is out of a fear and concern, which is understandable. That I think the more information we're able to provide as to what's happening, you know, I would love to come back in a quarter or two and say, hey, this is how many people we got who are here, who found permanent housing, who are able to be connected to families, the same way as we saw the results in the downtown. So we want to have that ongoing conversation. But I'll let Matt answer as far as the Hotel 166.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So the service provider for Hotel 166 was Lawndale Christian Health Center. Some of you are probably familiar. They're located in North Lawndale Community Health Center, but they operate a range of other programs in the North Lawndale community and have for a very long time. They provided on-site primary care, behavioral health care, case management to residents, and there was a contract with them to do that work, just as we would anticipate here. As far as outcomes, thank you for that question. Really important. So a few different things. So one, we're looking at health outcomes this is a health forward approach to housing. So we are looking at When you pair housing plus services, do we improve people's health status, number one? Number two, do we improve entry into permanent housing in the community and out of homelessness? Number three, do we reduce cyclical utilization of services and save the city money? So we're looking at all three of those areas.
I have a question. Are these patients allowed to have visitors?
Would they be allowed to have visitors? That's
To
the
take them to come and go, to walk in the streets?
so.
Or can somebody come from Indiana visiting and start something? Are they allowed to walk in the public, or do they need assistance from someone in the facility? And you also mentioned at any time you can change it to public housing. How are we gonna be aware of that?
So I'll leave the second question to my, the importance of being aware of what I don't know, and the housing question is for my colleagues. So if you have a question about behavioral health or primary care, good for that. The first part of your question was about the coming and going, right? So there's a few things. So one, part of establishing a contract with the provider is having policies and procedures, having a safety plan. I can tell you, when we were doing research about this program, one of the, I would say, best practice findings we heard from other cities is it's important to be able to monitor ingress and egress, who's coming and who's going, and there's staff that are highly engaged with that. And that's what I would anticipate here, is that that is happening. I also want to have opportunity, though, to work with the alderman, to work with the police district, to work with the residents, and work with the service provider to come up with an exact plan. But I think it would be safe for me to say to you, people will not be coming and going without there being monitoring.
Not if you have one security guy and he leaves at 2 p.m.
Well,
Could you explain what Housing First is to the audience?
sure, I can explain it, Housing First. So with respect to the security guard question, so we, as mentioned, would have 24/7 staffing. So people are not, you're not having a scenario where there's no one there after a certain time. So that's the question about that. So just in terms of terminology, whoever said talking about Housing First, thank you for saying that, defining terms. So Housing First is an evidence-based philosophy for ending homelessness, which is built around the idea of first giving persons pathways into housing without conditions, so that once the person is appropriately and stably housed, you can address the unmet needs that they have. There are other housing models that say you must do 1, 2, 3, 4 things before we will house you. And the trouble with that is telling someone, let me use an example, with schizophrenia, once you stop having symptomatic schizophrenia, we will get you into housing. Not a great model. Turns out that doesn't work. So instead what you do is you house first and you embed services in and start engaging. I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
He doesn't take his medicine after you house him.
So that's a great question. So as somebody, I'm sorry? Okay, so I'll try to, do you want me to?
No, I mean, she said it happens a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so I'm aware. I think that part of the gift and challenge of this work is caring enough about people to journey with them when they're struggling with things that I will say that to minimize the difficulty of it. But what I have found, and I mean this with total sincerity, is that when you powerfully journey with people, it's really amazing the transformations that happen. And we sometimes overstate the significance of trying to force people to do things they're not prepared to do. In the long run, it doesn't work that well. You burn bridges with people. So this model is really about powerfully journeying with people, building connections with people, and helping them make important changes in their life. But I'm very aware of that challenge.
Can I ask a question about, might help everyone with the answers they're looking for? What will this be, like, how is this going to be classified and who will oversee it? And what I'm asking more is, for example, Freedom Place down the street on Lincoln, that is a supported living facility for people who are blind or visually impaired. It's considered a Illinois supported living facility, and the state of Illinois has rules and regulations down to how many residents live there, basically will determine how many nurses, CNAs, it goes into everything. So I'm just wondering if you have those answers, how they're classified, and have them live with me because of their delusion. They're not violent. I'm using the they and them. I don't want to identify anybody in particular. But the person can't stay with me because they leave in the middle of the night. The door is open, windows open, they may bring somebody back, I don't know. It's been an ongoing problem for 20 years. They've lived in this ward for more than 20 years. I know that a block over from me, people rented to people who were not competent, and the lady was murdered. I also know that the other night we had to call the 20th district because a person was sleeping on a lawn. This is the 5900 block I'm talking about. Sleeping on the lawn next to a stairway. I didn't see them at the time. It was on the ring, and somebody saw them going out to work in the morning. So we have people in our ward already who live here, who grew here, who were born here, who, no fault of their own, now have problems that their families, myself included, cannot solve. I'm 81 years old, and I love these people, but I cannot help them. This sort of program, if it is feasible and if it works, is something we need.
First, I want to thank you for your service. Thank you for all the work you've done for the board, as well as Alderman O'Connor. I want to make sure we answer the question. That's right.
First question, can you answer the first question? The young woman who asked about this.
What he's trying to do. Yeah, that's what we're asking right now.
Yep, that's.
Yeah.
What was the question?
So I think the question was about regulation, and so part of the what will determine what state agency regulates it would be, for instance, some of it's dictated by the types of Medicaid billing that the provider would be doing. So, for instance, if the providers, one of the ways you pay for this model is through recouping Medicaid billing. So I'll give you an example. So if we were to try to bill for medical respite services, which is a particular service type, this would be under the purview of the Department of Health and Family Services of the state of Illinois. So a state agency, HFS, will have some regulatory authority over this. Separate from that, though, is the fact that if we're doing billing for mental health services, the Division of Mental Health of the state of Illinois has to regulate to allow for that. And then the health department has to sign off and review all the protocols that the city enters into a contract with these service providers to provide. So our physicians, our social workers, our nursing staff, etc., will be reviewing those protocols to ensure that we don't have quality concerns about how they're delivering services. And that is not a box checking exercise, that's ongoing. So we will be continually doing quality improvement related to the clinical protocols. Does that answer your question?
Will it be classified as like a shelter, supportive living? What's it going to be classified as? Because depending on that will determine the rules and regulations. Because everything you mentioned, like that's all done at Freedom. They have all of that. They have mental health, they have food, they have. So how is it going to be classified to determine?
So the building will be going through sort of a plan development process, which is where we determine a special type of zoning for the building, and that will be related to the building use. And so this isn't permanent supportive housing because it is a sort of transitional, time-limited time that somebody's staying there, nor is it necessarily emergency shelter. It's sort of an in-between, and in many ways a new model to what Matt was speaking to earlier. And so It will not have the same sort of rules in place on it that the permanent supportive or supportive housing models that you see have, but that zoning process will take place again sort of through this public forum with City Council. And there was a question earlier about placement into permanent housing. This doesn't exist in isolation. There is a large system already in place through the Department of Family and Support Services, through the Chicago Continuum of Care, that helps to place people experiencing homelessness from homelessness into either rapid rehousing, into permanent supportive housing, or exiting from homelessness in other ways. And so this program will engage with those systems and with those partners. On top of that, the Department of Housing is currently investing significant amount of money into developing new permanent supportive housing. So we hope to both expand the stock that exists and link this program to existing systems that help to transition people effectively into permanent or supportive housing or out of homelessness.
All right, I had you, because you guys had your hands up, so you got you.
Mr. Vasquez, my name is Jerry Eckwood. I've been in this neighborhood my whole 64 years of life. And the reason those motels were built, I think everybody knows, is because the Edens Expressway wasn't built until 1951. Now when we had former Mayor Daley and former Alderman Patrick O'Connor, they were doing great with them. They got rid of 3 good ones. I think they should all be torn down.
Amen.
Was there a question?
Private property.
Private
What was
property.
it? Was the question, why haven't they not been torn down, I guess?
Why aren't they all torn down?
Because they're private property with private owners. So the reason it occurred before was because over multiple years, they were able to take over the actual site, the government was, through eminent domain, where they paid the appraisal price for what the properties were.
We have one of the safest districts in the neighborhood. And everybody here knows what those motels were.
Not anymore.
We've got,
Yeah, it was real
we've
safe
got
in the
a
80s and 90s over
library,
there.
we have a fountain, we have a brand new police station, 20th district. And thanks to the 20th district police officers for making it safe for us.
Thank you.
Guys are always around, yes.
Good evening. My name is Gail Coleman. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm here with, United Power. I'm a member of All Saints Peaceful Church. And, there's a question here somewhere. Okay. I cannot emphasize the importance of relationship, okay? It's so important, especially with people with schizophrenia, okay? That they have one person, or like a team, okay? 2 people that they can relate to. I had a nephew who was diagnosed with schizophrenia in his 30s, and he was living in San Francisco, and his therapist said, "Oh, yeah, you're doing okay. You don't have to see me anymore." He committed suicide in February of 2019. So I know that there are a lot of clinical social workers in my parish, and I invite them to join me with making relationships with people with schizophrenia, okay?
With all due respect,
Yes.
can we let her finish?
Yeah, to be fair, yes, to be fair, question, please.
Will you join with me to form relationships with people? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a question, but we didn't ask you. So, sorry. So, okay, it is 7 o'clock, so we'll take 3 more questions. If people have, hold on. If people have more questions after the 3, 2 things.
Chicago together.
Here we go. So, if people have questions, let me get this set up for you.
You agree? Are you agree?
Yeah. I was here with the doctors.
Here we go. If you have questions to ask, two things again, as we said in the beginning. There's a QR code up. You can put your questions to submit them. We will answer the questions as we receive them. If you're not able to use your phone, you can then also grab a sheet of paper to fill out and ask your questions. Okay?
I have a question.
All right. Yeah.
Excuse me. I was next. I can also be really quick.
No, hold on. I did say she was third, and so you're next up. Sorry about that.
Thank
you're
you.
Next after that.
Hi, some very, very quick context about where I'm coming from. My name, I'm getting to my question. Give me, neighbors, I'm asking for 20 seconds of context. My name is Reverend Lindsay Joyce. I pastor a church in the area. We are acting as a temporary site for migrants, and the reason we are acting as a temporary site for migrants is because we have been a stopgap for people who have been displaced for years. We have been asking for something like this forever. So I want to commend you. And my question is, in all of these meetings, I'm hearing so much misinformation about people with mental health, about housing, about what all this is. Is there political education that is going on? How can we support that? How can we make this and more of this happen?
Yeah. So I appreciate the question. I think there is a wealth of information out there. I think some folks, just to be fair, paying their bills, trying to make sure they can live their lives, aren't necessarily accessing all the information. But I think conversations like this and the ones we will continue to have as things move forward, as people reach out to our office, are the opportunities to have that. Because I understand the concern and the fear that folks, articulate here. I think sometimes the fear takes on so much that it doesn't let people see what's actually occurring. We actually have people out there with mental health issues on the streets. We actually have unhoused people in our neighborhoods. We actually have these problems. And there aren't any invisible borders that keep them away from the neighborhoods. Right? Folks who want to travel here are going to travel here, whether they have good intent or bad intent. But I think having the conversations with everyone and being respectful as all the questions, again, I think it's absolutely fair to have the concerns, is the way to continue that engagement. And it's not like, it's not a one-stop thing. It's not something we can do on the website. It's something we're going to continue to have the conversation so we can continue growing that way. You were next, and then you two back there. Go ahead, hands up.
My name's Nick. I live right across the street from Diplomat. I ran a business in Uptown for 10 years. Alderman Schiller, when she was in power, she did a whole program of social work. And I totally appreciate it. I have mental health things and compassion for the homeless. I'm raised Christian and all that stuff. It was a disaster, and that neighborhood is still recovering. So I'm just curious to know if you guys looked at the models that she tried to implement in Uptown, what you're doing or what you're attempting to do in Memphis Square. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, good question. I don't know, can she add on that question? Okay, cool.
Yes, the other side of it is, what are you going to do with the remainders of those hotels up there too? Because they're all dealing with the same thing. Is this going to be a model that you're going to replicate for all of them? Because the concentration of that is a dangerous thing, going back to what Schiller did.
Yes.
You can't have that here. It's dangerous. Can you please address that in what your
Sure.
overall plan development for that?
Yeah. Yes, I think one, as we were talking about, back to the information and back to what Matt kind of mentioned, there's a lot of associated connotation of danger when the results and the data does not bear that out. But there is a very real concern, and I think being able to bring up. Again, I'm answering the question is that now to your concern and the concern you're voicing, that, hey, all the great intent and good faith in the world, what happens if the thing doesn't work out? Right? So two things, which were also mentioned. Two things which were also mentioned in the presentation, in case people missed it over whatever they were thinking. Two things, right? We want to have regular check-ins to make sure we're seeing what's happening. Are there improvements? Are there challenges? Are there concerns? We want to talk through the security plans, right? But also, as was mentioned, there's the agreement that's going on. But should it not be successful, then the city still owns the property to be able to make that affordable housing, to do other options with it. So as we're having the ongoing conversation, and should we see that it's not bearing out and being successful, then the conversation about, well, what do we do with the property now is where we'll find ourselves. And I will say, it's not a secret, I'm a huge proponent of affordable housing. So it makes sense that if the city owns the property, it can then meet a developer who can build 100% affordable on it. So either way, whether it works, which we all hope it works, we want to see the success, but should it not, there's still the opportunity to then look at it for affordable housing. And we want to do check-ins between now and then to make sure we're tracking the progress.
But what about the other hotels?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, the other hotels. The other hotels were originally looked at to do the same, the Old Mine, the guest house were. Due to circumstances related to remediation, that is not moving forward because the city's not looking to acquire when there are remediation problems. That being said, I am looking to see if we can have actual housing for the refugee population because they're all currently in the 20th district. So if we can partner with a model that can do the housing for the refugees as well, we would be looking to do something.
So there's not going to be any development on that strip that's actually going to increase the assessments to lessen the burden on taxes for the rest of us who live in Lincoln.
No, there's plenty. So there's looking at the 5035 North Lincoln. There's looking at, well, we're trying to look at the one at Catalpa in Lincoln, for example. So there's about 9 or 10 property sites. We've actually talked to developers about them. What the challenge is due to the high property value, no one's looking to buy them because they can't make any money off of them. So that creates a challenge because they want to go, well, can we do luxury condos or something that can raise the property value and then raise the property tax? They're not able to because of the cost of the property to begin with.
Is that why you're trying to deteriorate the city?
Can you raise your hand?
Yeah, raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
No. That wasn't a question. Sorry.
It's not your turn.
It's the word is spoken, ma'am.
Sorry, go
We
ahead.
have questions over here.
Hi, my name is M. Sigma. I use they, we, and she pronouns. I'm with 40th Ward Workers United. I fully support stabilization housing, a housing first approach, and bring Chicago home. I would, however, like to hear more about the security at this location. I am concerned about vulnerable people and the position, the precarity that they can be put into. So I would like to know, will security have weapons? How are we making sure that security is not making a situation worse for people who are already experiencing a precarious situation?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Good question.
So I think it's a very fair question, and just to frame it, when we talk about safety, I think the mic went out, actually. Can y'all hear me right now? So the question is, when we're talking safety, it's not only safety for folks outside, but it's also safety inside, and how people view safety when you got people with weapons inside. So the answer to the question, which is also an answer to the question for people concerned about safety outside, is that we're going to be talking to whoever that awardee is, along with the 20th district, along with the community, to make sure we have a safety plan that addresses multiple facets, right? Knowing that folks inside also have to make sure that they're safe from other residents inside, right? You got people dealing with mental health issues. You want to make sure that there's an on-site presence for that. As Matt mentioned, also making sure for egress and ingress, I did get that right. So making sure there's a log for people coming in and out, that there's accountability there.
How's it done now at 166 though, Andre?
I'm sorry?
How's it done right now at 166?
Oh yeah, the night's dead. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what we did at Hotel 166. So we were monitoring. You had to check in. There were limitations.
I'll repeat it because I'm louder. Go ahead.
This is still not working. Okay.
That's
So-
a sign the meeting could wrap up.
Absolutely right.
Okay, so at Hotel 166, you had to sign in and sign out. We were monitoring ingress and egress, and then there are, of course, our hours where guests can no longer visit, right? So there was careful monitoring of who was coming and going, and yes, we had security.
Armed or unarmed?
I don't recall. We can get you that answer through the questions. I don't remember. We work closely with the First District Police Command staff.
So here's the thing. Everyone, as you can tell by the fact that the mic is cut, time is up.
No, will you commit to another meeting before there's a vote?
Yeah. Well, there's one in August that we have.
She just said June or July, it's going through the city council.
Yeah, our next one will be August.
So, no, we want a meeting before there's another vote. We already had a vote.
That's what this meeting is.
Please commit to another meeting before the next vote.
No.
Why not?
Why not? Why not?
Why not?
Yes, we're having a meeting now. If you have questions, feel free to send it.
Jesse.